Lana's heart sank as she stood behind the counter at the fast food joint. Her smile, though practiced, was forced as she handed over an order to a customer too distracted by his phone to acknowledge her. Normally, she wouldn't care, but today she felt the weight of her circumstances pressing down on her. Just a few months ago, she had been working a high-paying job as a software engineer, hidden away in a back office. But then, in an inexplicable twist of office politics, she had been let go. Her boss had claimed she wasn't presentable enough. That struck her as absurd. After all, she worked behind the scenes, never interacting with clients. But despite her protests, she was left jobless. Since then, Lana had been working at this fast food restaurant, trying to keep her head above water. She didn't love it. It wasn't her calling. Writing code had been her passion, not serving burgers and fried chicken. Yet, she knew she couldn't afford to be picky. 2 months' rent was overdue, and her landlord had given her just 3 days to pay up or face eviction. The pressure was suffocating. As Lana sighed deeply, her mind racing through all the obstacles in her life, she heard a faint noise. Tink, tink. Startled, she looked around and saw no one at first. Then, she noticed a small hand holding a nickel, tapping it against the counter. She looked down to find a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, staring up at her. The girl's dress, though clearly expensive, was dirty, and it was obvious she hadn't changed it in days. She smelled of the streets, but what really caught Lana's attention was the innocence in the girl's eyes, coupled with a deep sadness that tugged at her heart. "Hey there, sweet thing," Lana said, kneeling in front of the girl, and finally offering a genuine smile, one that wasn't forced or part of her customer service routine. The girl beamed in response, her wide smile lighting up her face. "Hi," the girl chirped, her voice full of both joy and hope. Lana's heart ached as she looked at the nickel in the girl's tiny hand. She knew the truth. There wasn't a single item on the menu that cost that little. But before she could say anything, the girl innocently asked, "What can I get with this?" The question hung in the air. Lana knew the answer, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. The girl was clearly hungry, her eyes full of hope, and Lana could see the same desperation in the child's expression that she had felt herself years ago. Lana had grown up poor, and there had been times when she and her mother had lived on the streets, struggling to survive. She knew the pain of hunger all too well. As the little girl stared up at her, Lana felt torn. Her manager had made it abundantly clear that they weren't allowed to give away free food under any circumstances. The threat of being fired loomed over her, especially now that she was already struggling to pay rent and her mother's medical bills. But then the girl tugged on her apron, pulling Lana out of her thoughts. "Is it too little?" "I won't get anything," the girl asked, her voice soft and unsure. Lana felt a lump form in her throat. This little girl wasn't asking for a handout. She genuinely thought she could buy something with the nickel she had. Lana swallowed hard, knowing she couldn't say no to that innocent face. The child reminded her too much of herself at that age, lost, hungry, and clinging to a small sliver of hope. Gently caressing the girl's cheek, Lana whispered, "This is enough for some hot, tasty fried chicken." Of course, it wasn't enough. Lana knew she was lying, but she couldn't break the little girl's heart. Her manager wasn't around, and if she moved fast, no one would notice. Without wasting another second, she took the nickel and quickly turned to the kitchen, preparing a small box of fried chicken. She worked swiftly, packing the food, her heart racing the whole time. Her manager could return at any moment, and she knew the consequences if he caught her. But she couldn't think about that now. This little girl needed help. When Lana returned with the food, the girl's eyes lit up as she saw the steaming box of chicken in Lana's hands. She snatched the box excitedly and hugged Lana tightly. "Thank you so much, miss. You're an angel," the girl said, nearly jumping up and down with joy as she opened the box and began devouring the food right there. Lana's chest swelled with a bittersweet sense of pride and sadness. Seeing the girl's happiness made her heart feel lighter, even if only for a moment. But her relief was short-lived. As the girl happily skipped away, Lana turned around and froze. Her manager, Mr. Smith, was standing in front of her, his arms crossed and an angry expression on his face. "Was that a freebie?" he asked sharply. Lana's stomach dropped. She fidgeted with her apron, her mind racing for an excuse. She couldn't show him the nickel. He'd never understand. "I asked if you gave that fried chicken for free," Mr. Smith's voice boomed, making her jump. "Can you please just deduct it from my salary?" Lana mumbled, barely able to get the words out. Mr. Smith's eyes narrowed as he sneered. "Salary? You already took an advance on your salary. Or have you forgotten?" Lana's heart sank further. It was true. She had taken an advance to cover her mother's medical expenses. She had no money left. "But that was only half," she stammered. "And the rest is the price of that fried chicken," Mr. Smith shot back, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Lana felt her world crumbling around her. "No, Mr. Smith, that's way too much. The chicken doesn't cost that much," she pleaded, her voice breaking. Mr. Smith's face remained hard. "Oh, yes, it does. It costs you your job." Lana's legs nearly gave out. "What? No, please no," she begged, tears welling up in her eyes. But Mr. Smith didn't waver. "You're fired, Lana." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Fired. The one thing she had feared most. With rent due, her mother's medical bills piling up, and her daily groceries dependent on this meager paycheck, she couldn't afford to lose her job. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to plead with him again. "Please, Mr. Smith, I have bills to pay. I have responsibilities. I can't lose this job." "You should have thought about that before giving away free food," he said coldly. Lana was crushed. She stood there, frozen in shock, unable to process what had just happened. Everything she had worked for, everything she had been struggling to hold on to, it was all slipping through her fingers. She had tried to do something kind, something good, and it had cost her everything. As she trudged home that night, she felt like a failure. Her fridge was empty, her bank account was drained, and now she had no job. Lana lay on her bed that night, tears silently soaking into her pillow. She thought of her mother's words, "Do good, and good will come back to you." But as she stared up at the ceiling, all she could think was, "What did I do wrong?" 2 hours had passed since Lana's manager fired her. She sat on her bed, overwhelmed by the weight of her situation. She had lost her job after giving free fried chicken to a hungry child, and now her landlord had called, informing her that he would be coming by soon, likely to kick her out for not paying rent. Her thoughts spiraled as she considered her grim future. Jobless and homeless, all because she had chosen to be kind. Lana pressed a pillow against her face and screamed, trying to release the frustration building inside her. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Her heart sank further. Her fate had arrived. She knew it had to be her landlord, ready to make her homeless. Reluctantly, she dragged herself to the door, but to her utter shock, it wasn't her landlord standing there. Instead, it was a man she vaguely recognized. The man was a regular customer from her previous, high-paying job. She had often seen him sitting in the corner, silently eating his breakfast while staring out the window, lost in thought. He always had a stern expression, which led her to believe he was cold and unapproachable. "Hello," the man said, smiling. Lana was taken aback. She had never seen him smile before. She faked a polite smile, trying to mask her confusion. "May I come in, miss?" he asked, his voice respectful and kind. Surprised by his politeness, Lana stepped aside to let him in. As soon as he entered, the man did something unexpected. He took her hand in his. Lana was shocked and unsure of what to make of the gesture. "Thank you so much," the man said, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. "Because of you, I have my daughter back." Lana's confusion deepened. His daughter? What was he talking about? She didn't understand. "So," she asked him to clarify, "your daughter?" The man nodded. "The little girl you gave the free fried chicken to, she's my daughter." Lana's mind reeled in shock. She felt as if she had seen a UFO. It seemed more believable than the revelation she was hearing. The expression on her face must have been strange, as the man chuckled softly before continuing. I suppose I'm dropping all these surprises without much explanation. Let me tell you the whole story, he said, sitting down on the couch. My name is Edward Hunt, but you can call me Eddie, he began. I'm a single father. I lost my wife a few years ago, and after she passed, I had to take on full responsibility for raising my daughter, Emma. Before my wife died, I was just a dad who spoiled my little girl. But after my wife's death, I had to be everything for Emma, and I failed. His voice wavered as he spoke, and Lana could see the pain in his eyes. He rubbed his face with his hands before continuing. I couldn't balance work and parenting. I put my job first when I should have been there for my daughter. She was suffering, and instead of supporting her, I was harsh and dismissive. I let her down in ways I can't even begin to describe. Eddie sighed deeply. One day, about a week ago, I was so cold and rude to Emma that she couldn't take it anymore. She ran away with nothing but a few dollars in her pocket. I can't even begin to imagine what she's been through, wandering the streets, alone, vulnerable to God knows what dangers. He paused, rubbing his temples as if trying to erase the terrible memories. Then he looked at Lana, his eyes filled with gratitude. But then she found you. If you hadn't given her that food, who knows where she would have ended up? She could have walked out of that fast food place and disappeared forever. I was lucky enough to be nearby when she came in. When you gave her the food and hugged her, I saw it all. You can't imagine what it felt like for me to see my daughter again. Lana's heart softened. She had lost everything, her job, her sense of security. But hearing Eddie's story made her realize that her small act of kindness had changed his life in a profound way. He had found his daughter because of her. When I saw you hug her, I thought I was dreaming. I had lost all hope, and then, because of you, I got my daughter back. You gave me everything, Lana. Thank you, Eddie said, his hands clasped together as if he were in prayer. There was a brief pause before Eddie spoke again. But I heard you lost your job because of my daughter. Lana was surprised. How did he know? Your manager told me. Eddie explained quietly. Lana didn't say anything. What was there to say? A moment of awkward silence hung in the air before Eddie broke it. I'm not here to offer you charity. What you did for me, for my family, it can never be repaid. But I want to help. I run a company, and we're currently looking for a software developer. I think you might be the right fit for the job. With that, he handed her his business card. Lana stared at it in disbelief. Blue Wings Corporation. It was one of the most prestigious firms in the city, and she was being offered a job there. Her mouth hung open, too shocked to speak. Eddie chuckled again and nodded. Yes, it's real. Lana struggled to compose herself. Thank you, Mr. Hunt, she finally managed to say, her voice full of emotion. Call me Eddie, he smiled, and Lana smiled back. Inside, she felt as though she was dancing with joy. Just then, the doorbell rang again. Lana opened the door and found little Emma standing there, a chauffeur by her side. The girl smiled brightly, holding a white rose in her hand. She walked over and handed the flower to Lana. Without a second thought, Lana pulled the girl into a tight embrace. This sweet child had unknowingly turned her life around. As they hugged, Lana thought back to something her mother had always told her. Do good, and good will find its way back to you. She had been at her lowest, certain that she had lost everything. But in that moment, standing there with Emma in her arms and Eddie offering her a new opportunity, she realized something important. Sometimes, being kind doesn't fix everything. But every now and then, it opens a door you never knew was there. Lana's life had been turned upside down, but now, because of her kindness, it was all starting to come together again.